So I'm sitting across my now husband's parents. It's our first time meeting, and I want to make a good impression. We just finished lunch at a Turkish restaurant when someone says, "Hey, let's get ice cream." Everyone nods. I smile, but I'm not smiling on the inside. I don't like ice cream. Never have. I'm not a dessert person. I'm the type who checks the ingredients on crackers and puts them back if they have sugar. I'm not saying this out loud, obviously. I'm just saying, yeah, sounds good. And hope it ends there. Well, it doesn't. So we walk to the ice cream shop. Everyone's ordering. I'm last. And I feel it. That social heat. It's silly, but I don't want to be the odd one out. The difficult one. The one who doesn't get a scoop. So I say, 1 scoop of salted caramel, please. And when I take my first bite, I'm shocked. I like it. I really like it. And that one bite, it didn't just challenge what I thought about ice cream. It cracked something deeper. My identity. The belief I'm not a sweets person. After that, I started trying other desserts I'd always refused. Not because I suddenly craved sugar, but because the identity I built around not liking it didn't hold anymore. For years, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I believed I didn't like sweets. And that belief shaped everything. How I ate, how I shopped, how I saw myself. Someone who chooses health. And honestly, that identity served me. But it wasn't truth. It was just a story I believed. And it worked, because I lived it. That 1 scoop of ice cream didn't just change my taste. It revealed something much bigger. How much power our self-image has over what we do and what we don't. A lot of people wish their sweet tooth away. They curse their lack of willpower. And that's exactly why it doesn't work. They identify as someone with a sweet tooth. I identified as the opposite. And even though it wasn't true, my brain believed it. It didn't crave sweets. It didn't feel like I was missing out. That's the point. Identity drives behaviors. And the good news, you can put it on. This isn't magic. It's not mindset fluff. It's psychology. We usually think habits start with goals. I want to lose weight. I want to stop snacking. But James Clear in Atomic Habits says that kind of thinking is backward. He argues don't focus on outcomes. Focus on identity. Because lasting change doesn't come from what you want. It comes from who you believe you are. And every action you take is a vote for the person you want to become. Skip dessert? That's a vote for I'm someone who's in control. Skip a workout? That's a vote for I give up easily. It's not about being perfect. You don't need 100% of the votes, just a majority. Enough to convince your brain, hey, this is who I am now. When I didn't like sweets, I still had the occasional treat, like my mom's birthday cake. But it didn't change my opinion. I still believed I was not a sweets person, because identity, not the occasional behavior, was driving the story. And that's exactly what happened with exercise. I used to say I'm not a gym person, which would have been fine if I'd done something else, but I didn't. That label just became a permission slip to do nothing. Then I learned that exercise is the most powerful anti-aging drug we have, and I couldn't ignore that anymore. So I decided to test the action identity idea. If small repeated action shapes how we see ourselves, then maybe that could work for me too. So I picked one thing, something I could actually stick with. So I chose yoga-inspired stretching. 50 minutes in the morning. It's short enough to silence the excuses. It didn't feel like real exercise. But I enjoyed it and I showed up and I kept going. And slowly, that one action shifted something. I no longer saw myself as someone who avoids fitness. I started to see myself as someone who moves. And that identity grew. Now, I lift weights to flexibility training. And I've started calisthenics. I became someone who trains, and I love being that person. I didn't get there with motivation. I had zilch. I got there with votes. One baby action at a time. And that's just one path. Identity doesn't only come from action. It can also be shaped by the labels we're given, the language we use, and sometimes by what we deliberately choose to believe about ourselves. So let's look at each of those one at a time. Identity doesn't always come from behavior. Sometimes it's given to us by the people around us. Robert Cialdini in Influence explains that when people make a public commitment or are seen in a certain light, they tend to act in a way that aligns with that perception. In one study, people who were simply told, hey, your neighbors see you as charitable, ended up donating more. When we accept that label as true, we want to protect that identity, whether it started out true or not. I was living in a suburb of Philadelphia, and was my first time in the US. I was staying with a host family, and everything felt oversized, especially the food. I mean, the chip aisle alone. It was wild, so many flavors I'd never seen before, and I wanted to try everything, and I kinda did. And within 5 months, I gained a fair bit of weight. And I started thinking, hey, I don't want to go back to Germany looking like a dumpling. So I began cutting back. Then one night I was at a friend's place. Just the two of us and one of her friends. And we were just sitting around chatting when a bag of chips was opened and passed around. And I was just about to reach in when my friend said, she won't have any. When she says no, she means it. She's not like us. I froze. Not because I didn't want the chips, but because I suddenly had a reputation I didn't even know I'd earned. And I liked it. It made me feel strong, disciplined. So I leaned into it. Not just that night or when she was around. I became that person, and still am, because someone else saw it in me, and I didn't want to let that version go. And here's the thing. You don't have to wait for someone else to hand you a label you like. You can give it to yourself. And that's exactly what Brian Johnson does. Brian Johnson calls himself a professional rejuvenation athlete. Not because someone gave him that title, not because he earned it in the traditional sense, but because that label drives how he lives. He trains like an athlete, but for longevity. He doesn't just try to sleep better. He calls himself a professional sleeper. Why? Because when you adopt a serious identity, you naturally act in alignment with it. You protect it, you perform it, and it shapes your standards. You're no longer someone who's trying to be healthy. You're someone who trains to not die. And if you think that sounds extreme, consider traditional athletes. Take a runner, a serious one. They don't wake up wondering, should I run today? Or should I push it to Tuesday? That question doesn't exist in their life because they are a runner. It's not a task, it's an identity. And that's where language becomes powerful. Because saying I'm a runner is very different from saying I run. And that's what Adam Alter explores in his book, Anatomy of a Breakthrough. He explains how small shifts in language, especially using nouns instead of verbs, can change how we see ourselves. Saying I run describes an action. Saying I'm a runner describes a person. One is something you do. The other is something you are. And when you frame it that way, your brain treats it differently. It stops being optional. It becomes a standard. Because once you are something, skipping it doesn't feel like a break. It feels like you are out of alignment. And the power of that is huge. It doesn't just guide your choices. It shapes what kind of choices even make sense to you. I didn't say I'm someone who avoids sugar. I said I'm not a sweets person. That's language doing identity work. So how do you apply this strategically? You don't have to wait for a label to land on you. You can choose one. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be known as? What's the reputation I want with myself and with others? Maybe it's someone who eats well, or moves every day, or keeps their word. Then choose one small action that aligns with that identity and use that action like a vote. Every time you do it, you're not just building a habit, you're reinforcing a self-image. And when you're deciding whether to follow through, check in. Is that what that kind of person would do? You don't just eat healthy, you're someone who values their health. You don't just avoid sweets, you're someone who's in control. personify it. Talk about yourself that way. Because over time, that's who you become. It works because, as Olivia Fox-Cabane explains in The Charisma Myth, your brain has a hard time telling the difference between something real and something vividly imagined. That's why people develop physical symptoms from placebo pills or allergic reactions to harmless plants they believe are poison ivy. The brain doesn't wait for external proof. It acts on what it believes is true. So if you speak about yourself a certain way, if you act like a disciplined person, a runner, professional sleeper, your brain starts wiring that as your reality. You don't have to wait until it's true. You start acting like it, and then your brain and your behaviors follow.